I'm reading from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriyananda based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. This week's reading is, Can Man See God? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. There is a saying in chapter 1 of the Gospel of St. John that would seem to respond with a definite no to the question, can man see God? The saying is, no man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. Many great saints, however, claim to have seen God. If we ask then, can God be seen, rather than can man see God? The answer is yes. Otherwise, those saints lied and the scriptures themselves lied. For as Jesus also said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The point is, it is not man. It is not this human body, these human eyes that sees God. God can be seen only with spiritual vision, with the eye of the soul. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 11th chapter, thou canst not see me with mortal eyes, therefore now I give thee sight divine. Behold my supreme power of yoga. With these words, Hari, the exalted Lord of Yoga, revealed himself to Arjuna in his infinite form. Yogananda, in Autobiography of a Yogi, describes the supernal experience in words more readily comprehensible to modern minds than the poetic phraseology of the Bhagavad Gita. The chapter, An Experience in Cosmic Consciousness, is one of the most inspiringly beautiful in all mystical literature. Here is a brief excerpt. An oceanic joy broke upon calm, endless shores of my soul. The Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body is countless tissues of light. I saw the divine dispersion of rays pour from an eternal source, blazing into galaxies, transfigured with ineffable auras. Again and again I saw the creative beams condense into constellations, then resolve into sheets of transparent flame. By rhythmic reversion, sextillion worlds passed into diaphanous luster. Fire became firmament. I cognized the center of the Empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my heart. Irradiating splendor issued from my nucleus to every part of the universal structure. The creative voice of God I heard resounding as Om, the vibration of the cosmic motor. This, so the great masters aver, is what God is. And this also, they insist, is what we are in our deepest reality. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. I get to unmask briefly here so I can actually speak without speaking into a pillow. So this is a very beautiful and lofty subject this week, the idea of being able to see God. And I love that in the Gita passage, it's the Lord Krishna as Hari speaking. Hari is the stealer of hearts. And God, in this aspect of Hari, the stealer of hearts, steals us away from every other desire, every other distraction. If any one of you happens to have a cell phone, does anybody have a cell phone? I find it to be incredibly useful, so much that I use it way too much, and it becomes a distraction. There are so many distractions in this world. But if we think of God, that thought begins to swirl in our minds and gain momentum and gain energy. And we want to think of God more. God is that which steals us away from all the sorrow in this world, all the grief, all the pain. Yoga is the pain-free state. And if we are fixed in our minds on truth and on God, then everything else recedes. Another beautiful word for God is rasa, supremely relishable. I love that one too. He makes everything else dim. That beautiful story that I've often told of St. Teresa of Avila, before she had done her dharma of creating her own order of nuns, she was in a convent which was very social. They had a parlor, and visitors would come, even young men would come and court these young nuns who were often there because their families had put them there. They didn't really have a vocation. And one day, one of these young cavaliers was there trying to steal Teresa away from the convent, and he was making his case, pleading his case for her to come away with him. And she was a little tempted. She was drawn to this person. And suddenly, behind him, Teresa saw Jesus. And Jesus was saying no. And she became riveted in this vision. And this young cavalier could not move her, could not get a word out of her. She was rapt, immovable. And that's how it is with us eventually. We will not be swayed by the distractions of this world. And we have this new retreat facility. Many of you have gone up and seen it. Yesterday we had a painting work day, just uplifting the vibration so much, just cleaning and cleaning. And it was not lived in for some time, so it really needs that freshening and enlivening energy. And I was so struck, I've been struck the times that we've been up there by the silence, by the depth of quiet that's there. And I've often thought, we're calling it a forest ashram, forest hermitage, and it has that peace. It's so much easier to meditate there. And I've been thinking recently, this is why yogis go to the Himalayas. They get away from the sound of sirens and fire trucks and the churning thoughts of the multitudes, just to get to a quiet place where there's no distractions, except the cell phones that we bring with us, which I think we need to turn off once in a while. So if we want that vision of God, we need to cultivate that desire. Let all the other desires go. I have been doing a lot of shopping for our new retreat, which is a great way to work out desires because you're just buying it for, not for yourself, for someone else. And the more I do it, the more I realize that everything in this world is so ephemeral. Why do we put any stock in it? Why do we care so much about things that disappear? Even this body eventually goes the way of all things. Why are we so attached to it? If we can step back, like this beautiful affirmation today on contentment, if we can step back from all the commotion of this world, all of our attachments, all of our desires, all of our need to control, to have things be a certain way, the more we can live in stillness and not be tossed about on the waves of thoughts and feelings and attachments, desires. The more we step back from that, the more we live in that eternal sense of God, sense of peace. And that's all that matters. I was thinking about perception. You know, we have these instruments of perception, sight, hearing, taste, and so on. And the other day, Chaitanya is our neighbor, and he has a beautiful cat. And this cat comes to visit us thinking that our house is just an extension of his house. And so he was visiting the other day, and he was sitting on my lap on the couch. And all of a sudden, he sat bolt upright, ears up, rigid, staring at the door. And I didn't hear anything. I was listening. In fact, I was expecting someone. I didn't hear a thing, but he did. And then eventually, after some time, I heard footsteps and then a knock on the door. And I was thinking, we are so attached to our senses and what we think is reality. When animals hear so much better, some of them see much better, they can run faster. Sometimes I think some of them are a lot smarter. But we have no idea what's really out there, what is really happening in this world. There are great saints and sages who are planning and helping the evolution of mankind. And we're so caught in this little lifetime. We need to surrender more, trust more in that underlying vibration of God. Everything is God. If we give ourselves more into that, the happier we will be, and the more we will be able to perceive what is truly going on. Yogananda urges us to memorize the poem Samadhi that he wrote, which, like this excerpt from this morning, is one of the most beautiful pieces of mystical literature in existence. And if we can memorize and live more in what that poem is expressing, we will know our true nature. and what we truly were born for. As these great saints say, that is what we are, that cosmic vibration. So I'll end with another cat story, since this is such a lofty subject. Talk about something more down to earth. So this happened many years ago when we lived in India, and we had started a community in Pune. There are still 30 acres there of land, of retreat land. And we had built some houses. Swami had built his house there. And it is on a very steep slope. And the houses are way up on the hill, and the community kitchen and dining room and all of that are down at the bottom of the hill. So at lunchtime, we would, just run down the hill. It just took a couple minutes to run all the way down. And then it took a long time to go back up. And I used to think, as I did it every day, multiple times, it's going to get easier. I'm doing this so much. It never got easier. So one day I was a little late for lunch, and I went screaming out the door and running down the hill. And I caught a glimpse of our cat down the hill, and he was up on his hind feet, and he was swatting at something. And I thought, oh, he is just the cutest darn cat. I just loved this little cat. So as I got closer, I wanted to see what he was playing with. It was a white cobra, about, 6 or 8 feet long. And he was, batting, and the little hood on the cobra would go down and go up. And so I gently called to him to come away. And I can still see his little eyes, the way he would blink like, what are you making so much noise about? I'm just here playing with my friend. And so I realized he was not going to come away on his own, so I creeped up on him, and I bent down, and I tried to gently pick him up, but I had been so quiet that neither he nor the snake noticed me. And when I touched him, he jumped. He jumped, and so the snake jumped, and then I jumped. And then we all came back together again. And so this time I was determined, and I went in very slowly but firmly, picked him up and pulled him away. And the snake sort of went, well, what? Why are you doing that? We were having a good time here. And he put down his hood, fortunately, and he went away in this beautiful, scintillating motion, as we know snakes do. Now, here's the point of why I tell this story. The sun was shining on this white snake, making him incredibly beautiful. And as I said, the way he moved was fluid and amazing. And the sunlight even made him sort of glitter. It was very, very striking experience. I'm glad it wasn't striking in another way. But what I realized, even though my heart was beating and I was very grateful to have gotten my cat out of harm's way, what I realized is that God was in that snake. God is in everything. Even the deadliest of creatures. So if we can think in terms of God being in all the deadly situations of our lives, all the scary things, all the hard and difficult things, the more we can be at peace in ourselves. Yogananda once had taken some of the boys on a trip through the jungle with a driver and a bullock cart and these cows pulling the cart. They had to stop at a little hut with a place for the cows, and the driver forgot to close the gate, even though Yogananda had reminded him. And when they were inside, he noticed that the driver had positioned himself farthest from the door, and he asked him, "Did you close that gate?" And he said, "No, I forgot." So Yogananda knew if the tiger got the cows, they would be stranded. So he went out, and as he saw this tiger, he had to confront it, and he did it with great love. He looked at the tiger with complete love. And the tiger turned around, went away. Yogananda shut the gate, and they were saved. So we need to cultivate that kind of love. I'm not saying I had that with the cobra. I wasn't even thinking, I was only thinking about my cat. But if the more we can live in this world with that kind of love, the more we can do good in this world. The more we are, as Kriyananda would say, a cause and not an effect. We aren't just having to react to everything and make more and more mistakes and more karma for ourselves, but instead we can give. We can be a cause in situations. We can change the energy. We can make it God-centered. So think on these things and be at peace in yourself, trying to cultivate more of that divine love, which is the essence of this creation.
Well, I also will start with a cat story, as it happens. This happened a few days ago, and I was concerned that it involved Chaitanya's cat, actually, because two cats were having speech with each other of the variety. And this went on for a long time, and I thought, this is, somebody's beating up on somebody, and this is going to not end well. It reminded me of how people are sometimes, or how nations are sometimes, sort of yowl at each other, and doesn't necessarily lead to a good outcome. Anyway, I went away from, I was hearing this, in the area around our front door where I was working, and so I went out and found, and the cats were not in the community. I thought I could actually come and approach them, but they were across the little canal beside the community. And I was amazed at how close they were. I mean, they were like this far apart, just eye to eye. It was like, oh, this is my turf. No, it's not. That sort of thing. And how it's, I just hollered at them. I said, "Hey!" I was like, "What? We're just having a little negotiation here, But it was sort of the same response as our cat, apparently. But anyway, interestingly, they did actually stop. It was like there was a little interruption there. I have pondered long this topic or this question, can man see God? What does it take to have the divine experience? And as Nirmala was saying, it takes opening to love, it takes awakening a deeper awareness that's beyond the attachments of this world, beyond the commotion of this world. There's I'm going to read just a brief quotation. This was very interesting to me, and I had never heard of this person. His name was Abdul Raham, Rahan, and he lived, I hope I didn't mispronounce that horribly, but he was the emir and caliph of Cordoba in Spain in the 10th century. And this is him describing his life. He's 70 years old at the time that he wrote this. He said, "I have now reigned for more than 50 years in victory or peace, beloved by my subjects, dreaded by my enemies, and respected by my allies. Riches and honors, power and pleasure have waited on my call. I have diligently numbered the days of pure and genuine happiness which have fallen to my lot. They amount to 14. 14 days out of 70 years that he could count pure happiness in his life." Now, it's interesting to me, that is a fascinating contemplation, because in his world, he was at the peak of his world. I mean, maybe his domains did not extend, like Alexander the Great, from Persia to China and so on. But nevertheless, in the context of his world, he was the king of his domain, and the world awaited his pleasure. And yet, he only had 14 days, 2 weeks out of 70 years that he could count as pure happiness. And the question was, why? What is it? And it struck me that when we reach outside, when we look away from our own nature, from our own being, then we get pulled into the up and down. We get pulled away from the experience of the divine vision or of our own true nature, which is joy. And it's sad, and it's predictable. And and in this day and age, we can see the same thing. We see movie stars who commit suicide. We see, or get into trouble in one way or another, and basically create misery for themselves. Not that being a movie star is an automatic to doing that. Of course it's not. It's not the outward role that we play, but it is the inward awareness with which we play that role. And I'll just share a couple of experiences that I had in my life, one of which happened probably 25 years ago, maybe more. I went for a short seclusion and camping trip in the Sierras. And this was not in the high Sierras, but it was probably 4,000 or 5,000 foot elevation. And I was in a remote area with a lake. I was camped near a lake, and the day was over, and it so happened. I don't think I planned this, but it certainly was planned for me. It was the night of the full moon. So the sun went down in the west, the moon came up in the east. I had finished my dinner, and I think I had even been so conscientious as to do all the dishes, and everything was done. It was all just set. And I had nothing else to do that evening except meditate and go to bed. And as the moon was rising, and it was very quiet, it's just a remote area. There was nobody around. I think it was like a weekday. And I hear the frogs start in. And it was kind of like this little orchestral moment where, first everybody's tuning their instruments, and you hear this kind of cacophony of sound. And then the little symphony began, and it was the frogs and it was the crickets, and I suppose there must have been birds. I don't know. But it was like everyone was chanting to the moon that was rising in the sky. And it was just this perfect moment. And I thought, there's nobody else to enjoy this whole incredible scenario except me, as far as I could tell. There's nobody else out there. And if they were, now of course in that era there weren't cell phones the way there are now, and I suppose, but people can of course bring their own distractions with them. They don't have, cell phone is not a requirement to have distraction. You can cart that around with you wherever you go, no matter what you have. But just to be able to sit and enjoy this, it was completely unexpected, unplanned, and completely absorbing in the moment. And I've often thought, like in reference to the Gita reading where Hari, as Nirmala pointed out, the stealer of hearts, the thief of hearts, is sharing this experience with his beloved disciple who wants to see the infinite form, and so he reveals it to him. Now, of course, Arjuna ends up with his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. It's a little much for him. It's pretty intense. The divine vision is like pretty powerful. In fact, I was reading this morning, Yogananda describing the divine vision says that it comes with a natural inevitability to the sincere devotee, but it requires a whole lot of preparation. And he goes so far as to say that mere intellectual willingness is not enough. The yogi has, by practice, has to expand his consciousness through devotional bhakti also, which is another way of saying what Nirmala was saying earlier. It has to be divine love that expands our awareness to the point that we are not overwhelmed by the divine vision. Otherwise, it's like too much for us. I was thinking of a little kid wants to drive the car. Mommy, let me drive the car, 3 years old or whatever. Let me drive the car, I can do it, I can, and maybe mommy puts little Johnny on her lap, and lets him hold the steering wheel while they're driving around in the parking lot, meanwhile she's working the brake and the gas pedal. Fine, okay, she's there, if something goes haywire, she can just take the steering wheel and do it. You're not going to give little Johnny the car and say, oh, here, sure, take it to California. I mean, I read the story recently, a little kid, 5-year-old kid got pulled over trying to drive from Utah to California to buy a Lamborghini. I mean, how, why? I mean, it's like way too many questions attend this particular situation. But I mean, how does the little kid understand the realities of, I can remember, maybe you can remember, the first time you ever merged onto a freeway. It was like, whoa, this is scary. How is this going to work out? I'm trying to get my speed up to the speed that everybody else is going. Are they going to get out of my way? Is there going to be enough space? Is this going to work out? And, over the time, over the years, if you have a little imagination, you realize, most of the time people can merge onto the freeway and they don't crash. But, the first time or two, it's like, is this really going to be okay? Well, we have to get to that perspective. This camping trip that I was referring to, I was in a similar area. I don't remember if it was the same trip or, I don't think it was the same trip. But anyway, I was nearby that area and I was also camped at night and I was alone and woken up in the middle of the night to hear noise right outside my tent. Breathing. That sort of thing. And I thought, oh God, and I had strung the food up in the tree, whatever. I had done all the routine, for the bears, whatever I thought. But yeah, I didn't know. I mean, is a bear going to think that I'm possibly a good snack before midnight? I mean, I just, you just don't know. I mean, but I was really, really aware, was intently aware. And I thought, and this just went on for a while. And I thought, well, I've got to know what's going on here. So I finally got to the front of the tent and peeked out, and it was cows. It was a bunch of cows out. I was like, what are cows doing here? I mean, but it helped me to realize that to have a divine, now won't describe that as a divine vision. I will describe that it was divine relief afterwards, that it was not a bear, and I was not going to, cows are not going to walk over your tent. I mean, they're not going to squash you or anything. I didn't feel in any mortal danger at that point. But we have to be fully present to have the divine vision, to receive, to be able to see God. Because in a sense, we're always looking at God anyway. We just don't see. We don't perceive. Swami told about his father being assigned to Romania to develop oil. And he said, this goop had been coming out of the ground for a long time. It was just sticky stuff that gets stuck on your boot. I mean, wasn't of any particular value to anyone until it was of great value to everyone. But what changed? The goop didn't change. People's awareness of it changed. And of course now people's awareness is changing a little more, and maybe the goop isn't the best stuff to make use of, and maybe we'll find other ways to energize our world. It's perception and awareness. And as Nirmala was saying, we have to develop those things ourselves and open our hearts. And when we do, we will discover that the divine vision is with us all the time. Or at least as much of it is with us as we can assimilate and will be finding useful. If the divine vision was with us all the time, how much more would we really do in this world? I mean, there's the great saint Ramakrishna gave his disciple Vivekananda a samadhi, an experience of the divine. And afterwards, Vivekananda was like, well, you need to keep giving that to me all the time. And Ramakrishna said, no, it's in my back pocket now, and I will give it to you as and when you finish doing your work in this world, otherwise you won't do any. And so for us, we may have a little ways to go, but know that it's always waiting. Divine Mother keeps it in her back pocket, yes, but it's always waiting. And she plays hide and seek. Hari, the stealer of hearts, is busy playing hide and seek with us. Reminds me of when Easter would come every year, and with great anticipation, me and my sisters would look forward to this. The event involved having to find our Easter baskets, because our parents, the little game was they would hide the Easter basket. Well, now, the challenge was you had to make it difficult enough, but not too difficult. Because sometimes those mornings ended in tears where we couldn't find the blasted, you tear the house apart and you can't find the stupid thing. Of course, and then we did, we'd either get a hint or whatever. We always found the Easter basket sooner or later. But that experience is, we are playing that game. And sometimes we do get very frustrated. But Divine Mother's trying to make it interesting for us, challenging for us, and yet she's always there for us. So let us know her presence and feel her blessing and prepare ourselves for that divine vision.